Rob is going to talk a bit about the procedures available in small claims court.
Thank you, Hilko. Is this loud enough? Can everyone hear me? Louder. Okay. Well, my name is Rob. Good afternoon, everyone. I recently graduated law school, so I'm new to the profession. And I was also a volunteer legal observer over the weekend for the G20, so I was there with many of you. I just want to talk briefly about sort of what's involved with small claims court, what does it really mean, some of the details about procedure, to hopefully help give you an idea of whether or not it's something that makes sense for you, is something that you want to find out more about, or whether or not one of the other processes that's been described already is more relevant to what happened to you or what you might be interested in achieving. As Vilko said, small claims court is for claims primarily for monetary compensation. So if you're looking to get money, it's under $25,000 and under is what you can bring to that court. Also, I spoke with someone earlier today who had indicated that her bicycle was confiscated and stolen. That may have happened to a number of people, or other property was taken by police. That's something also that you can deal with in small claims court. A claim can be made by anyone, really. And if you're an adult, you certainly can make the claim. If you're a minor, you can make the claim. So if you're under 18 years of age, you can make the claim, but you can only make it up to $500. If you want to make a claim for something more than $500, you're going to have to be represented by an adult, which could be a parent, could be a guardian. So it's important to know that difference. As Vilko already said, you don't need a lawyer. Small claims court is meant to be accessible to non-lawyers. There are still procedures and maybe complicated things, but you don't need to be represented and people can do it themselves. There is a cost involved. For a basic claim, it's about $175. It's $75 to make a claim, and it's $100 to get to a trial. There are other costs involved throughout the process. For example, if you want to call a witness, there's a small cost for that. You should also be aware that in the case that you are successful in a small claims action, some of these legal costs that you pay up front, you can get back from the person who uses. If you're not successful, you will be responsible for paying some of the legal costs of the defendant. So those are costs that can come depending on the outcome of your case. The case can also be appealed, so that could prolong it, take it to another stage. And if you're successful and you get a judgment in your favor, there's always enforcement, and that's unfortunately a different and sometimes frustrating issue than actually being successful in your case. So actually getting the money is a different process and can involve some other costs as well. But for the basic cost, you're looking at around $175. In terms of length, you would want to expect that small claims case will take anywhere from 6 months to a year. So it's hard to say exactly where it would fall, but about a year is something that you should start to think about. In terms of when you would want to start, you have 2 years to make your claim. After 2 years, you can't bring it for these kinds of things. If your claim has to do with something with the charter, like assembly or freedom of speech, there's no limitation on the time. But it's always better to get things started as soon as possible. The part about the charter? Limitations. So generally speaking, there's 2 years within which to make your claim. And after, if you're making a claim that has something to do with the charter, so freedom of speech, for example, there's no limitation period on that. So it's not a 2-year limitation period. But it's recommended that you start as soon as possible. The sooner the better. Makes sense. Primarily in terms of, recording what happened, evidence, people who might have been witnesses. It's all better to get that stuff done now than to leave it later. It might be harder to get and put together. I kind of did this question and answer in my notes. So one question was, what are my chances of winning? And my answer is, it depends. Before this panel, we discussed how that's the classic law answer and is the most frustrating answer you can hear. So I'm not really getting into that because it's hard to say. It depends on your circumstances. People do win in these kinds of claims. and people don't win. And that might be something, if you have a particular question, you come up to us afterwards. Questions about who do I sue? A very similar things that have come up in the class action talk. It's likely that it's an individual police officer. If you were assaulted, for example, or if you were searched, a lot of us don't know the names or badge numbers, so that could be difficult to pin down the actual police officer. So the Toronto Police Services Board is who you could name as a defendant. There's a bit of jargon for you, but essentially who will be the person that you're suing. Vilko touched a little bit about this. What am I suing for? So if you don't fit into the class action or any of the other claims, if you were, for example, assaulted, if your property was taken from you, illegally searched, these are the kinds of things that would fit into a small claims lawsuit. In terms of evidence, how am I going to prove my claim? What do I need to be successful? Those things can be taken a number of different forms. Your own testimony, so your own what you experienced. It makes, if this is something you think you'd like to pursue, you'd want to collect your thoughts, think about what happened, write it down, get out as much information as you can, and that can be useful. If there are any witnesses, friends or family who are with you or other people you know, that also can be useful. If there are photographs or videotaping. So it's a good idea to think about all these things that within your experience might be available to you. Gather as much as you can. And those are the kinds of things that you would use to try and make your claim and be successful in court. And what is the process like? I'm not going to get into many of the details, but just to give you an outline of what you go through in a small claims case, it starts off with a bunch of forms and filings. So you create a claim, which means similar to the human rights, you're filling out information about what you're saying happened to you, who you are, information about the people that you're suing, and so on. And then filings and servings, which essentially means you have to give those papers to the court, and you have to give those papers to the defendant or the people that you're suing. And that process happens for a while, and there's a number of time limits and things involved. And we'll try and save those details. Maybe if there are people who are interested in pursuing this more directly, can find out a bit more about. Gathering evidence is something that you can start with right now. As I mentioned, the various forms of evidence, that's something that you want to do. There's an opportunity to try and settle your case, so to not take it all the way to a trial. So you can sit down with the other party and with a judge, and if you want, you can try and get that done before trial. So that's a stage in the process before you get to actual trial. Then you come to your actual trial. At the end of the trial, there'd be a judgment, which would either be in your favor or not in your favor. As I mentioned earlier, after the judgment is the enforcement. So if you win a certain amount of money, for example, or the court says that the police have to give back something that they took from you, maybe a camera or a bicycle, the enforcement stage comes after, and that's a bit of a process on its own. And then after that, there's always an option potentially for appeals. Whoever loses may disagree and want to try and have another court take a look at it. I see I only have a couple minutes left. There's examples of the kinds of money you could win, but I don't want to get into it. If you want to ask me individually, maybe that makes a bit more sense. It ranges anywhere within that $25,000 limit. And finally, where do I go from here? We have a booth at the back. There's an email sign up. There's a flyer you can get that has some information about websites. There's a lot of information on the internet from the government and non-government about how to pursue a claim in small claims court. So you can do those kinds of things. And depending on what kind of interest there is, there may be some talk about holding a small workshop with people who've done this before to give you some more of the details and help you through the process. And that's it. Thank you.
Mobile broadcast news.